All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, this lesson is going to be a pretty short one. We're going to be talking about the election of 1824, and then we're going to be talking about the Trail of Tears. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the Cherokee people. Okay, even though there was other tribes, we're really focused on the Cherokee. And then we're going to end with the story of a particular rose that's known as the Cherokee Rose. All right. So there's the objective today. We're going to analyze again the election of 1824 and see if it was actually stolen or it's just a coincidence that what happens, as you're going to see in a little bit. We're examining whether the president's cabinet positions should be given out or should they be earned. So when somebody's Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, things like that, should it be earned or should it just be, given out? And we're going to create an argument again on whether the Cherokee Rose story is true or not. Okay, because I'll be explaining the story to you and basically tell me what you think, whether it's true or not. So here's your warm up picture. Now, um, if you really can't see it because of your phone, I do apologize. But in class, when we had it on the projector, it was a lot easier to see and pretty a lot of students seem to get the gist of the question, which was, what is this artist basically showing here with the Native Americans? So they're on a journey, as you can obviously see, but based off the picture of your analysis, out there looking at their body language and their facial expression, um, does this look like a happy journey? Does it look a sad one? Does it look like they're, you know, ready to go, things like that. I mean, what's this picture giving off, you know, from your perspective, from your point of view, from your analysis? Okay. So look at the picture left to right, up and down, front and back, things like that. And tell me, what's your interpretation of what this artist is trying to show of these Native Americans' journey? Okay. So pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. So, the election of 1824. This one was a little different from the election of 1800, which there was a tie. In this case, nobody won the majority vote. Okay, so that's where the problem comes in now. It's like, okay, well, who's going to be president then? If the number to become president, it's not met, what do we do? Now, as you can clearly see from this chart, when it says electoral votes, um, you see Jackson with 99, Adams with 89, Crawford with 41, and Clay with 37. So basically, what happens is under the Constitution, they have to get the top three, and they basically have a runoff. So Jackson, Adams, and Crawford are on the ticket, but Clay is taken out. Now, if you see that, Clay has a good chunk of people voting for him. And this is where it became known as a corrupt bargain. Now, thing is, I put in quotes because there's nothing that truly says, like, there's no smoking gun, there's no documents that says, give me this, I'll give you that, you know, but it's just suspicious. Because the thing is, John Quincy Adams, he wins. He basically gets all the votes that Henry Clay had. He basically gets them. And on top of that, when Adams becomes president, he makes Clay his Secretary of State. Okay. Now the thing is, Clay is a veteran politician. It's not like he's just coming out of nowhere. People know him, people respect him, and people know that he's pretty qualified to be Secretary of State. But it's just weird coincidence that Adams gets the votes needed that Clay had, and then Clay is appointed Secretary of State. So to Andrew Jackson and his people, this is seen as like, oh, this election was stolen from us. Because again, Jackson had the most numbers at first, but ends up losing. So his supporters became known as Jacksonians. Okay. And the Jacksonians were Democratic Republicans. Now, at this same time, Federalists, the people who during the War of 1812 basically were demolished, they started to come back now. They start to build themselves back up into the political realm. So these Democratic Republicans are starting to kind of, you know, lessen a little bit, not much, but still, the Federalists are starting to climb back up. Now, the voting population grew. In 1824, it was just 355,000 people. But what happened was the requirements to vote lessened. Basically, in 1824, you had to own property and you had to be a white male over the age of 21. Now, in 1828, you basically just had to be a white male and 21 years old. Now you didn't have to own property. So now this time around, 1828, Andrew Jackson wins. Now he introduces the spoil system. This is a fairly new thing at that time, which was Jackson gave jobs, appointments, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Education, things like that. He gave that to people who were his friends, people who helped him get elected, and not necessarily people who earned it. People who knew how, let's say, treasury worked, how the money system worked, who were economists and things like that. No, he just gave it to somebody who helped him win. Same thing with the Secretary of Education. He didn't give somebody that job to somebody who was a teacher or administration or anything like that. No, he just said, "Hey, you helped me out win the state of New York. Here you go. Here's his job." Okay. The bad thing about that is a lot of those jobs they affect the millions of people in our country. So to give someone just a job just because they helped you out, that really does hurt some people, especially when that person has no idea what they're doing, and especially when they think they do. Okay. Now, does this still go on to this day? Absolutely, absolutely. From Jackson up until now, it has been done. It's just that the smarter presidents give their friends or the people who helped them out, they'll give them jobs or appointments to committees that are lower, that doesn't really affect that many people. But the big ones, yeah, they can really hurt people. So these Jacksonians, who were again Democratic Republicans, they decide to change their name again and now be simply known as Democrats. Okay. Now, the anti Jacksonians, the Federalist people, they decide, you know what, we're going to change our names too. So they became known as the Whigs. Okay. Don't ask me why they changed their name to Whigs. Um, to me, it doesn't sound very intimidating, but that's what they chose, the Whigs. Now, this is one of the most despicable things that happen in our country. And we've had many moments of shame, and this is truly one of them. What happened was in Georgia, white settlers started coming into that territory, and that was the Cherokee land. The Cherokee got that land under treaty with the United States government, but these white settlers started coming in and saying, "This is our land now." And the Cherokees were like, "No, this is our land. Your government said this is our land. You need to get out of here." And the white settlers were like, "No, you can't make us. Try to." So there was already some conflict now. So some Cherokees felt we need to fight them with, arrows, with bullets, and some said we need to use the law. And that's what happened. Uh, there was two Supreme Court cases that went to, again, to the very top level about territorial rights, and that was the Cherokee Nation versus Georgia and the Worcester versus Georgia cases. And both of them were in 1832. Now, surprisingly, the Supreme Court said the Native Americans were right, that this territory was theirs. The treaty was signed with the government's, as a representative of the government to say this is their land and that they can't cross it. Now, President Jackson, who did not have a really good reputation with the Native Americans, basically, when he was asked, well, what do you think about this ruling by Chief Justice Marshall? He said, Chief Justice Marshall has made his opinion, let him enforce it. Meaning, he said what he said, okay, but what's he going to do? Nothing. So that kind of gave people the sense that Jackson's not going to listen to the Supreme Court. And remember, the Supreme Court's a law of the land, and the president's job is to enforce that law. So he is turning his back on the law of what our government says. So to some people, this is seen as like a corrupt president. And some people see it as, uh, no, no, again, the president can differ from what Supreme Court says, and he can't. He really can't. So, but they're still trying to justify what Jackson's doing. And then Jackson then comes up with this thing called the Indian Removal Act. And he tries very desperately to get those people who are siding with the Native Americans. He's trying to change their mind. He's saying, no, 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 you don't understand. We're not moving them to get rid of them. We're moving them to ensure their survival. Because Georgia is such a terrible, harsh, unforgiving land. And we need to make sure that these Native Americans, especially the Cherokee, are safe and preserved. So we're going to move them to a very secured area. We're going to call it the Indian Territory, which would be Oklahoma nowadays, as what we call it. Now, thing is, there are a lot of people who like this doesn't make sense. If you're moving them because it's such bad, horrible, this and that territory, then why are white settlers moving in? And you're going to find out in a little bit why. Okay. Now, here's the thing that I was told as a kid, but I come to find out that it's false. There was a legend saying that the military gave blankets full of smallpox to the Native Americans to kill them off. Um, but as I grew up and I started doing research and reading books and things like that, I come to find out that that's false. The real fact of the matter is there was already an outbreak of smallpox in the Cherokee Nation. Okay. Um, the smallpox had already been there, it was going through, right? Um, Now, the government did give blankets out, things like that. But the Native Americans who were sick, they would cough on it and some of that. So instead of destroying the blankets, like burning them and things like that, they basically held on to it. And if somebody was cold and some of that, they'd give them the blankets. So it's not that they started giving the Native Americans the smallpox. They basically just didn't contain it, didn't make sure that it didn't spread anymore. Okay. So that's what the truth is, not that they started it. Now, here's the thing President Martin Van Buren becomes president, and he could have easily stopped this Trail of Tears and said, no, 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 let's stop this Indian Removal Act. But he didn't. He let it continue. 2,000 Cherokee uh, males were fighting off the white settlers, fighting off the military, and about 2,000 of them died. Another 2,000 people died from exposure, starvation, diseases, and things like that. Now, if you look on this map right here, the yellow trail is probably one of the shortest ones because it goes almost in a straight line. The other one that you would want to take was the blue one because it basically went along the river, and the river has a current, has a flow, so travel was a lot faster. Now, for those native people who were considered like troublemakers, they'd be taken on the white track. Okay. And as you see, it goes through like Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois. It goes through the Appalachian mountain areas. So there's a lot of bounds up and down and things like that, and it goes all the way up and around. So it's a longer trip, and their hopes was that these guys would basically pass away from, again, starvation, disease, and exposure. Now, this is a story I heard when I was younger. Um, and as I was growing up, I got to meet a lot of Native American people, not just in this state, but several states. And I would ask them about this particular story because to me, it's a sad story. And a lot of them from different tribes told me almost the exact same thing, a little different details, but the crux of it, the main part of the story, is the same. So, like I said, Cherokees are forced out of the land. Um, the men are fighting, right? And the people who were basically the only ones who could have the strength to keep people moving and take care of people were the women. The older people were sick, they couldn't move that well, some of that. Children, same thing, they got sick, and um, they weren't able to, you know, take care of themselves either. So the women were really seen, looked towards for their strength and looked towards for the push and the drive, you know. But like I said in class, there's only so much people can take before they break, you know, and that's what happens. A lot of these older people died from, again, from exposure, starvation. Kids, same thing. Um, Same thing with the smallpox. It killed a lot of people. And so the story goes that one day these women are together. They're like cleaning their clothes, washing in the river, and they just start crying. Just tears just start pouring. And then they all huddle together and they're just crying. Well, one of the elders sees these women crying and basically asks the gods, give these women strength, give them a sign that everything's going to be okay, you know. And the next morning, where the women were crying, this rose you see this picture of just appeared. Now, here's the trippy thing: you can actually grow this rose, have it in your house, and things like that. But if you take this flower and you put it out in the wild, you know, near the highway or, out in the mountains, things like that, it will not last. It will die. It cannot really grow out in the wild out here, especially in the West Coast. Um, but the area you saw on the map where the Trail of Tears was, that those routes, that whole area, this flower will grow. It will survive out in the wilds in that area, nowhere else. Now, what does this flower represent? Well, the five petals represents the five tribes that we talked about. Okay, remember I said it wasn't just a Cherokee, there was several other. The white represents the innocence of the older people, the children, who passed away. The center represents the gold that was discovered in Georgia. That's why those white settlers wanted to move in. That's why President Jackson allowed those guys to get in there, because there was gold discovered on the Cherokee land. And that's why they wanted them out, so they can get that gold. The thorns represent the fierceness of the Cherokee people and the Native American people. You try to grab it, rip it out, you're going to get cut. They don't take things lying down. They will fight. So that's what the rose represents. So here's my question to you. What's your thought on the Cherokee Rose story? Do you believe it's true? Why or why not? Do you think yeah, that's exactly what happens, just like it's said and told and things like that? Do you believe some of it's fiction? It's like, oh, maybe this part is true, maybe this part is true, but not at all. Or do you think, no, 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 it's kind of far fetched? Maybe one thing is true in that story, but the rest doesn't seem possible. Doesn't seem plausible. What do you think? Okay. Now, as you see, I don't have a writing prompt on the bottom for you because I want to see how well you can start off the sentence. Okay. So let's see how you do. Okay. So with that being said, guys, that's it for this lesson. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Okay. So you guys take care, be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.